Sometimes life's burdens can take their toll on your emotional well-being. If you or a loved one is struggling, know that you are not alone. South Texas Health System Behavioral can help you cope with depression, manage feelings of anxiety, regain control of mood swings, and recover from substance use disorders. Our staff is available 24/7, offering the quality and compassionate inpatient and outpatient care you need to overcome life's challenges. South Texas Health System Behavioral, where your mental health is our priority. Good afternoon and welcome to our latest Let's Talk Mental Health webinar. I'm Tom Castañeda, the System Director of Marketing and Public Relations for South Texas Health System. On behalf of STHS Behavioral, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. To help Valley residents prioritize their mental health and break the stigma surrounding mental health, STHS Behavioral has hosted these Let's Talk webinars since 2021. Through these online seminars, which offer important education on common mental health conditions affecting people in our communities, hopefully more people will feel inspired to have open and honest conversations about their own mental health struggles with loved ones and seek treatment if necessary. In this installment, we'll be shining a spotlight on grief and loss. Most people grieve after certain events like the loss of a loved one, divorce, loss of a job, or death of a pet. When grief is overwhelming and powerful, it can seem to have no end. A study conducted before the pandemic by WebMD and Amerispeak found that 57% of Americans are grieving the loss of someone close to them over the last 3 years. Following the pandemic, health experts believe that number to be greater. While everyone's personal grief journey will be different, grief can affect your overall mental health. So it's important to learn how to deal with the grieving process. So how can we learn to cope with grief and loss? Well, today we're joined by Casey Salceda, a licensed professional counselor with Mercedes ISD, with some strategies. Welcome, Casey. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, grief and loss is something that we all deal with.
Right. Right.
It's something that it's unfortunate, but when it comes, it's universal. Mm-hmm. Everyone experiences grief and loss in one stage of their life. Why is it so important to address it and go through those stages of grief?
I think it's important because, especially if we haven't experienced it, it can be shocking. And so we really don't know how we're going to handle it until we're in that moment. And the thing with grief and loss is that everybody experiences it differently. So, it's a very personal experience. It's a very personal journey. So just kind of hearing about it and talking through it, I think really helps understand what stages are and what the process can look like sometimes.
And since it's so individual, yes, you have some commonalities that with those conversations, with those discussions, you can see some of them, but it's okay to be angry. It's okay to cry, things like that. And somebody else may not be experiencing those same issues.
Exactly. And I think, when you use the word, it's okay, those words, I think that's what we need to put in the conversation more often than not. Is when people are experiencing these different feelings. I mean, that's why we have so many feelings, right? Because we're going to experience them. So I think having that it's okay in the conversation allows a person, to feel validated in what they're feeling and not feel out of sorts with everything that's going on, because it is very overwhelming.
Now, this week in Texas, we commemorated the first case of COVID, and it was declared a COVID-19 Heroes and Memorial Day. We lost a lot of lives during COVID. Those numbers of the research of 57% before the pandemic, do you think that we are seeing more grief and loss today than maybe we've ever experienced locally?
I think so, especially during that time, and the manner in which everything was playing out was very different than what we had ever seen in our lifetime. All the news, stations were showing trucks and this and that, and that was very shocking. And not being able to be with loved ones really changed the process of what grieving was going to look like during that time. Mm-hmm. So, there's a different grasp of what it is and what it looks like as we proceed from that time.
And that's why today this topic is so important, because grief and loss can lead to other, unfortunately, mental health issues if not gone through properly, right?
Right. So we want to be able to have that conversation. Again, mental health is all about making it okay to talk about. And if we put it on the table and we talk about it, then people feel secure in saying, okay, this is how I'm feeling, and they're able to have these open conversations and seek the help that they need if need be.
And you have a great presentation for us, so let's get started.
Okay. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at what is bereavement, grief, and mourning. We hear these words, and then we really need to know what it is, the difference is. We're also going to look at pre-loss, after loss, and then the grieving process and how it can affect you. We're also going to look at mourning different types of losses. I think when we're talking about grieving, a lot of times we think of only death. But there's so many other things that we can grieve in our life, and they all hold validation, and they all hold meaning to us. And I think it's important to recognize it and to acknowledge it. So if we look at this quote by Helen Keller, it says, "What we once enjoyed and deeply loved, we can never lose, for all that we love deeply becomes a part of us." And I think that's really important, as we go through the process of grieving, how have people or things that we've lost, has it become a part of us, and how have we learned from the loss? So in looking at bereavement, grief, and mourning, so some pretty simple basic definitions. Bereavement is a loss of something of value. Grief is the person's reaction to the loss. So the bereavement is the whole process, but the grief is your reaction to that. So when we're in mourning, it's the behavior and actions of someone who is bereaved. We used to see people dressed in all black, and we knew that they were in mourning because they held, this belief that a person who had lost somebody, they had to dress in all black, veils, and for women. So mourning is the behavior and actions of someone who is going through the process of bereavement. I think one area that we really don't talk about very often is pre-loss. And so pre-loss grief is experiencing the emotions associated with grief before the loss actually happens. One thing that we don't talk about is that this is very normal. The grief you might be feeling is very real and likely overwhelming because it can include any or all of the thoughts or feelings experienced during the grieving process that follows death. It's okay to acknowledge that although your loved one has not died, you are still grieving. So we talk about pre-loss when we're talking about somebody with terminal illness. If somebody has been sick, even if it's a short amount of time, we can still feel those same feelings of loss. And again, that word normal, and it's okay. It's okay to experience these things and to acknowledge it. And to identify it. And a lot of times we see that people will start talking as if the person has already passed. That's okay. A lot of times we've also seen where some people maybe take offense to it. But again, when we're talking about bereavement, we're talking about loss. The process is so different for everybody. So just being aware that how somebody else is processing maybe a terminal illness is important, and to know that that's the way that they are coping, right? So pre-loss is important to acknowledge. So similar to pre-loss, however, differences include realizing the finality of death, assuming new roles or losing other roles, possible unexpected trajectory it takes as long as it takes for you, and guilty thoughts. So part of that is we start assuming these roles, right? And we start doing things as if the person has already passed. That next one is super important. It takes as long as it takes for you. When we start talking about the difference between bereavement and depression, there's a certain time period and things that we want to look out for. But at the same time, because it's so personal, we really want to honor how long it takes a person to go through the process. And then we see guilty thoughts. A lot of people may process these thoughts of, I should have done this. I could have done that. And so those thoughts can really keep us stuck in a place of lack of progression, right? So those guilty thoughts, though, are very normal because we start reflecting. And so reflection during this time is really, really important because it kind of puts us in a certain position where we're constantly thinking. So it's okay to think, right? But, let's maybe vocalize that so we don't keep it in. We look at the stages of grief. I think, a lot of us have heard of stages of grief, right? So we have denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. And if you look at this, graphic, it looks very neat. And it looks very, this is the process, kind of like the water process, right? It's like, this is how it is all the time, right? And I think growing up, we've been conditioned to say, this is how it is, this is what we do, this is how we process. But in actuality, as time has gone on and through therapy, and we see that healing is not linear. It looks more like this, right? And if you have been in a place of having lost someone, it feels like where it says my experience. I have witnessed people going through this in a period of 2 hours. They go through the process of anger, denial, acceptance, and then they go back to anger. And that's in just a very short amount of time. But I also see that when they allow themselves to experience this in a very organic way as to how it's coming out, they have a sense of relief afterwards. I've seen people take a deep breath and they can move forward. When they're allowed to experience the my experience portion of it without reservation, without feeling like it has to look a certain way, it does something for them to feel validated, right? So this linear graphic on the left of the stages of grief, well, it'd be nice if it was that simple, that, predictable, but that is what makes grieving very personal, is that it's very different for everybody, and it can look like that, right? So we just want to be aware that when we see somebody experiencing these different feelings all in different times or all at the same time, that we be there to allow them. And remember those words that you said at the very beginning, it's okay. It's okay that you're feeling this, and in the manner in which you're feeling and the order in which you're feeling it. So this is very important to acknowledge and to be aware of. So how grief can affect you. And there's, we see here there's very different ways. It can affect us spiritually. And it's all depending on your experience in life with your spirituality, with your emotions, mentally, socially, physically. Spiritually, it can affect people in different ways. I think what's very important is that we make sure to not have people feel like because they grieve, it's a lack of faith, right? And so I think that is honoring a person and how they feel in their process. So when we're talking about spirituality and how it's affected, it can really go either way. It can make them question, depending on the manner in which a person passes, or it can bring them closer, right? So we want to know and be aware that it can affect everybody differently. Emotionally, again, this is all emotion based, and it can affect anybody. The way we saw in this slide before, everything can be all together in 1 hour, in 2 hours, in 2 days, 3 days, a year. There's no real set way to say how it's going to affect you emotionally. I think the part that's super important is just the awareness of it and where you're at and how you're feeling at that moment. When we look at how it affects you mentally, it can affect you in your daily life, right? Work. It can affect you at home. It can affect your relationships. It can affect any way mentally, especially if we're not in a state where we're ready to talk about it. I think that's the hard part, is that when it stays in, you know, a good friend of mine, she uses a saying and she says, suppression equals depression, right? So when we see that holding in, sometimes it can really cause a mental state of depression, right? And so we just want to be aware of that and how long it's lasting. When we're talking about diagnosing and you know, something that goes beyond bereavement, we look at the length of time, right? And so what's hard about grieving is there's no set time. So this one is kind of tricky because we still want to allow people to be to honor their process, but we also want to be aware of how it's affecting them. Are we seeing a decline in daily life functioning, losing, you know, friends, losing relationships, jobs, things like that. Socially, we can become disconnected. You know, it's normal to feel like you don't want to socialize and things like that. But again, we want to make sure that we see how long is this lasting and to what extent. You know, anything in some sort of moderation is healthy or unhealthy. So we always want to make sure that we're aware of the time frames. And physically, you know, I'm a firm believer that when we're affected mentally, we feel it physically first. We're just not aware that it's a mental, you know, we're going through something mentally or some sort of issue, right, when we feel it physically. But a lot of times, you know, in our body, we'll feel it in our stomach, we'll feel it in our throat, we'll get headaches, extremities, you know, start to go numb. So we'll feel the physical effects. But when you keep that relationship with maybe your primary care physician or a therapist, you're able to talk about it and get to the root of it. Right? So when we're talking about how grief can affect you physically, it can feel debilitating. It can really make you feel like, hey, I am physically sick. I cannot move. I cannot get out of bed. I'm achy. I'm this and that, right? So these are all the different ways that it can affect you in one form or fashion. I also, you know, want to make note that this may not happen to anybody. You know, and their process of going through it can be, you know, where they don't experience any of this, and it's a very seamless process, and that's okay too. We don't want to assume that it's going to look like this every single time, right? So the assumptions we want to, you know, kind of toss out and make sure that we don't assume that it's always going to look like this. And what do we do when it doesn't look like this? I think that's important to acknowledge as well. Other things we can grieve. So when we talk about grief, we automatically think of death, right? And so it's important to acknowledge that grief is not just linear to one part of our life. And so if we look at this graphic, you know, we see that the things that we can grieve are friendships, divorce, careers, a loved one's health, physical mobility, our own health, infertility, parenthood, how our partners used to be, the parents we wish we had. There's so many things in life that we can grieve because it is so personal to us. And I think it's important that we honor that, especially when we're talking about it with somebody, you know, that we express why it's so important to us, right? And so letting go of anything is not easy for everybody. And so I think that when we hear, you know, I know one thing that's not on here is the loss of a pet. You know, we hear sometimes a lot of people will downplay the loss of a pet, but you know, the companionship and the care that it takes, you know, to take care of a pet is valid, right? And so we always want to make sure that we acknowledge, and that when someone is expressing that they have lost something in their life, that we acknowledge it, that it's something of importance to that person. And so these are just some things, this is not everything, but again, grieving is so personal. It can be anything that is of meaning and importance to you. So some other ways that we can, when we're experiencing loss, we'll go back to when we're talking about when we lose somebody or a pet, right? We also want to continue to bond, and that it's okay to do these things. So it's okay to do what's best for you. One of the things is talk to them in your head or out loud. I know a lot of times people say like, oh no, people are going to think I'm crazy, but it's okay to acknowledge their life in your life as still being there. When you see something you like, when you see something that reminds you of them, it's okay to acknowledge that person as still being part of your everyday existence, because it makes us feel good and it makes us still feel that connection. Writing letters to them, journal, computer, longhand, keep letters or create a ritual to release them. This is super important. I know a lot of times we don't write longhand anymore, but there's something very therapeutic about writing longhand still. So a lot of people, when they want to maybe say something that they didn't get to say, they're able to put it in a letter, they're able to put it in a journal, and that helps them release what, is still in them. Keep photos of your loved ones around, whether it's on your phone, whether it's at your office. And sometimes it serves as a motivation to continue, helping yourself throughout the day. Include them in special events and holidays. I know this is really important. When we lose a loved one, we kind of start marking time by the first. This is the first Christmas without them. This is the first Thanksgiving without them. This is their first anniversary of their death. This is the first birthday without them. So it's okay to honor them in these special events. I think it's important to do this because, again, it keeps you bonded with them, if that's what works for you. There's no one way, there's no right way. I know a lot of people during Thanksgiving, they will set a plate and they have a special prayer for the person at the table, and they honor them that way. During Christmas, I know people who will still get gifts for their loved ones. I know they'll go leave gifts at the gravesite. All these things are ways to continue to bond. Imagine advice they would give you when you're faced with tough decisions. Have those conversations of, well, if they were still here, I know they would want me to do this. I know they would tell me to do this. That's important to do to continue to bond. Take a trip they wanted to take. Leave photos in special places. Plan for anniversaries, holidays. Avoiding this can create anxiety or fear. Enjoy food they loved or enjoy food you love, but they didn't. Be open to signs from your loved one, pennies, cardinals, dragonflies, butterflies, hummingbirds. There's so many things that signify for us personally, our loved ones are still with us. One thing I didn't list here that I truly feel is a way to continue to bond is laughter. Laughter is so important, right? And so it's okay to laugh about the things that you used to laugh at, or it's okay to still laugh. This may sound a little funny, but it's okay to still laugh at them as if they were still here. That's a way to continue to bond. If you had that relationship with them to where you would make jokes about something, continue that, because it continues the memory of them. It continues that bond. And I think laughter is just such it's a great medicine for so much. And it's okay, right? Again, we're not told it's okay to laugh in sadness, but it is, right? So we want to make sure that we continue to bond with our loved ones, and something that honors them and ourselves and the process that we're going through. This is important. You know, how many times have we heard someone say, "Oh, I don't want to go because I don't know what to tell them," right? And it can be such uncomfortable situation for people because, you know, some of us do feel like, God, I don't want to say the wrong thing, right? And when we do say something, you know, it's okay that we're aware that it comes from a good place. Like if we're the person receiving these words from someone else, you know, it's okay to remember that when people tell us things that maybe don't sit too well, it's still coming from a good place. But to help people out, you know, when they say, oh, I don't know what to say. So these are some things not to say when someone is grieving. One thing is, I know exactly how you feel. And the reason we don't want to say that is because there is a difference between deaths, right? So even though we may have similar situations or similar, you know, like my father died, your father died, right? Even though they may be similar in that way, but it's still not exactly the same, and we still can't assume that we know how the other person is feeling. Another thing is, at least they are not suffering, right? And we talked about this before. It's okay, I think, for us to say these things to ourselves, but if we're not in a place ready to receive it, to hear it, it's not going to sit well with us, right? And even though the person is coming from a good place, they really mean well, and they want you to be in a better place, you know, mentally and to move forward. Words like this can maybe feel like what we're feeling at the moment is not validated, because while yes, the person may not be suffering, our feelings are we want the person here. And it's okay to feel that, right? It's not a selfish feeling, because to lose means to love, right? And so we want to honor that. Another thing that we don't want to say is to stay strong or to be strong. It's okay for us not to be strong. And so in these moments of loss, we don't feel strong. And that's okay. We have to honor that feeling of, you know what, I don't feel like I want to be this strong person, especially if maybe it was a terminal illness where you had to be strong for so long. You're allowed to let yourself, you know, go through this process. So we want to stay away from the words stay strong. Something else we want to stay away from is they're in a better place. Again, you know, if we feel that, okay, and you know, other people telling us they mean well, but at the moment of processing or trying to even wrap your mind around what is going on, you know, a lot of people are still in a state of, I want them here. Now, over time, you know, that may start to become evident that they are in a better place depending on your spirituality. But at the moment, you know, we need to really make sure that are the people we're telling this to in a place where they're ready to receive that? Or should we just be here to where we honor what they're feeling and the process that they're going through? Something else that we don't want to say when someone is grieving is everything happens for a reason. The reason we don't want to say this is because maybe at that time there's no valid reason. There's no good enough reason that this person is not here and I'm here to experience this. So we really want to just kind of, you know, stay away from these phrases, even though, you know, it's coming from a good place. We want to make sure that we're acknowledging what the other person is feeling and just being there to listen. So on the flip side, right, what do we say to someone who is grieving? So these are more general statements. I'm here for you. What can I do to support you? Your go-to. I love you. You know, that is really important. Whenever you want to talk, I'm a phone call away. I don't know what to say, but I'm here to listen. We're a society of talking. And I think what we need to acknowledge is if we move to being more listeners, right, then that will help somebody out more than anything. So a lot of times people just are looking for somebody to release things to. So rather than, you know, maybe saying something, even if it's in silence, sometimes you can be with someone in just silence and be there with them, and you will feel that sense of comfort just because you're feeling that closeness of somebody, and nothing really has to be said. So even though the silence may feel awkward, it really does have a bigger impact than we really imagine. So these are some things that you do want to say to somebody when they're grieving. And, you know, something that's, you know, if you can say something a little more general, you know, that is perfect. Everyone grieves differently. Factors that influence the grieving process. The relationship you had with your loved one. You know, that again, these are personal things that only that person knows, right? So that's going to influence how you grieve. The nature of death. Was it lingering, unexpected, violent? Those also affect how you grieve. So within our own life, you know, we can lose several people and they may not all die the same way. So we're not going to go through the process in the same way that maybe we did another family member. It's going to be personal for everybody, even within ourselves, that we may not experience that same process. Something else that is a factor, your personality, how you cope. Are you extroverted or introverted? You know, are you somebody that wants to right away talk about it, or are you more, you know, you go through the process, you do your coping on your own, and you're okay with that. Your physical health. Activity helps with grief recovery, depending again on your activity level. You know, I don't want people to feel like, oh, it has to look a certain way. Going outside, sitting outside, getting air, you know, not being enclosed in dark places and things like that. You know, being intentional in how you cope is really important to help with your physical health. And how that's going to play out in the rest of the process of grieving. Your phase of life, adolescent, parent, empty nest, retired, all this affects our grieving process. You know, are we somebody who takes care of our parents? You know, is it just you and your partner and the kids are out of the house, your partner passes away, now you're alone, right? So all this is going to affect or be a factor that influences your grieving process. Your life circumstances, finances, residence, job, children, present. Your support system, is it absent, safe, directive, family, friends, faith? That is really, really important. You know, if you have a support system in place, how are they there to support you in your process? And do you feel safe? Safe is always such an important word that we really can't downplay, because I think the safety part of it is really important. And when I say safe, I don't just mean physically safe, emotionally safe. Are my emotions safe with this person to where they're going to hear me and they're going to validate and they're going to be a safe place for me to come to? Your spiritual beliefs, comforting or challenging, and why? And these can change. You know, like I said earlier, it can push people towards their spirituality or away, or given time, if it pushes you away, we can see it develop stronger. Again, this is a factor that influences the grieving process, but we want to be aware that if we see somebody not, let's say, they feel pushed away from their spiritual belief, that we don't push them in a way that they're not ready to be there yet, right? So we want to honor, validate how a person is feeling in the process as they are grieving. And I added this slide because when I heard this explanation of grief, it really was a great way, I feel, of explaining it. It's from a movie called The Rabbit Hole. And so it reads, it changes though. And this is a conversation that they're having about a mother who lost her son. And she says, the weight of it, I guess, at some point it becomes bearable. It turns into something you can crawl out from, crawl out from under and carry around like a brick in your pocket. And you forget it every once in a while. But then you reach in for whatever reason, and there it is. Oh, right, that. Which can be awful, but not all the time. Sometimes it's kind of, not that you like it exactly, but it's what you have instead of your son. So you don't want to let go of it either. So you carry it around and it doesn't go away, which is fine. And so I think this is a great way to explain the process of grief and how it's not something necessarily that goes away, but you carry it. And it's okay for you to go through moments of, you know what, today's a good day. And then you're going to reach into your pocket and feel that the weight of the brick, and you're like, okay, there it is. And then you acknowledge it again, and then you go through the process. And it goes back to that graphic where you saw those stages kind of all messy and all a certain way. You know, that is what this quote from this movie kind of reminds me of. You go through it, right? And then you go forward, and then you go back, and then you go forward, and then you remember, and then, you know, and so that process is a constant roller coaster. I know it sounds like a cliche, right? But it really is a roller coaster of ups and downs, and the time that it takes, nobody really knows.
All right. It's funny that you ended on that rabbit hole quote, because it reminds me of a Trisha Yearwood song,
Okay.
which is the song Remembers When.
Uh-huh.
So you can be driving and a song will trigger, and it just goes to show that you can feel like you are fine and you're doing well, but then something will trigger it. It may be a song, or it could be like that feeling of that brick that she's talking about, or whatever it may be.
Right.
That it can hit you really at any time.
Right. There's no set time. I don't know if you've seen in movies where someone's like, oh, where are my keys? I feel, I lost my keys. And then it's like, oh, wait, this is what feels off. Mm-hmm. And that realization, right? So those experiences are real, And so, it's funny what the mind and body remembers, especially if it's, we're talking about some sort of traumatic death. The same chemicals that were released when it happened are the same chemicals that are released when we relive those moments. You know what I mean? So the brain and the body remember exactly what it is that you went through, but it remembers before you do. Mm-hmm. So these moments happen, and then you come to that realization of, oh, this is what it is. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so you can have different triggers that you don't even realize, are triggers, and then it just kind of takes you through that process all over again.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about guilty thoughts, which I think a lot of us experience of, I would have said I love you more, if mm-hmm. I would have noticed sooner, whatever it may be. Those guilty thoughts when you're grieving can really be debilitating.
Right. And so we want to be aware that when we're thinking those thoughts, it's okay to think, but we have to, find a way to vocalize it, and then, talk to somebody and see what those rational thoughts, because those irrational thoughts set in, mm-hmm. right? I should have done this. I could have done this. I should have been nicer. I should have said I love you. All those things that you were saying. But in reality, how do we know? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're human, yes. right? And so we have this innate ability to just go through life and, kind of dismiss those things until something happens. But that, I think, is the nature of us as humans.
I'll say that after I lost my father, I made a very conscious decision to say I love you to everyone, every mm-hmm. time, as many times as possible. And just so that I would never have that guilty thought
right.
that I didn't say it enough, because I felt growing up that my dad was really busy, we were in school, like just life happens
right.
and you're all too busy, and did you say it enough? And so sometimes you learn from those experiences that maybe it will help you in the next process, that that you did everything you could have done.
Right. Yeah. And it's like you said, in the next time, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that death is going to be a part of our life. If it hasn't yet, it will be, and so we learn from what we experience, so that way we can hopefully do things differently, or do those things where we make a conscious effort to say, I'm going to say I love you more, I'm going to make that phone call, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to do these things. And so then we approach life differently, and we value those relationships that we have.
Now let's talk about the 5 stages of grief. You went over them, but let's go into a little bit of detail just so that people who may be experiencing, we talk about denial, obviously when you're talking about death, like how does denial come into play?
It comes into play because it could be just the shock of it. Even if it is a terminal illness, we don't want to just say, oh, this is just for this. Denial comes in because it is a very shocking thing. Even if we are expecting it, there could still be that sense of denial of like, wait a minute, this person was just here and now they're not. No, that it's too unreal because the actions are happening before our mind can actually wrap itself around what is going on, but it can happen so quickly, the loss that denial sets in of, wait, I didn't see what I just saw, or I'm not experiencing what I'm experiencing.
All right, anger is pretty explainable. It's extremely upsetting to you when you're going through this.
Right. And then again, those factors that we talked about, the manner in which a person died. We start thinking, was it preventable? Could they have prevented it? So we get angry, maybe at the situation, or we get angry at the person. And I know a lot, then we have that guilt that sets in of, I shouldn't be angry. It's okay. These emotions are here for a reason, for us to feel them. And so anger is definitely a part of the process.
All right, bargaining. Tell us about bargaining.
When we bargain, we, this for that. If I do this, maybe, this will happen, or I should have done this. And so we go through that struggle of bargaining with, I could have done this and this would have been different, And so, but living in that mindset keeps us from progressing. So we have to be very aware of what is within our control and what is not within our control.
And the bargaining can also be me. It should have been me, not you.
Yeah.
So also feeling that sort of guilt, and bargaining for like, take me, not
this
not
person,
my parent.
right.
Especially if you're going through pre-loss. Let's say.
Right. Pre-loss will definitely put you in a bargaining stage of take me instead. But and that's normal. That's okay.
And then depression is pretty is self-explanatory as well.
Yes, and this one is tricky, right? Because again, it's hard to put a time frame on grief, right? And even though, we can get into the technicality of it, of it being diagnosable and the length of time that it says, but it's hard, So to me, it's when we start seeing a decline of life, such as, severe weight loss, severe weight gain. We're losing jobs, we're losing friendships, we're isolating ourselves for long periods of time.
Sleeping all day.
Or
not sleeping at all.
Right. And that's, that's why it's so tricky. It's because there's so many ways to identify it, because it affects everybody so differently. But I know, when we're looking at the time frame, we also want to honor a person's process and not be so quick to be like, oh, you're depressed. You're depressed. We want to just allow them to feel, I know you talked about your dad. When I lost my dad at 3 months, I was like, okay, tired of feeling like this. I need, shape up here, and so I was looking for some sort of out. And, that's why keeping with your primary care physician is so important too, because I remember I went to my doctor and I was like, hey, help me out. Like,
what do I have to do to be out of here?
Give me something, because I don't want to feel this. And she said, Casey, it's too soon. I'm like, no, 3 months is plenty. And she's like, no, wait. And so I did, and little by little, as time went on, the process changed. So I think that's super important to be aware of that.
And the last one is obviously acceptance. And I saw this in one of them, and it said acceptance and hope, which I think is adding that hope part of it just really allows you to understand that it's okay.
Right.
This loss is okay, and you're going to move on, and you're going to be okay.
Right. And that's, and again, when we look at that, you can feel it one day and not feel it the next.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel it for a week and not feel it for the next 2 days. So, these stages that we talk about, especially the acceptance, people will see that you're doing better, and people will see, and then they'll see, hey, wait a minute, what's wrong with them? Well, it's that
cycle
that just happens in different times.
And as you mentioned, it is a roller coaster, and I had it here before you even said the word. But basically, you can cry, you can become angry, you can withdraw or feel empty, and all of them are not unusual,
right.
And all of them are not wrong. Like, no matter what you're going through,
right.
Grief is going to hit you however it's going to hit you, and it's okay.
Right. It's such a personal experience. It's such a personal process that sometimes it's hard for people on the outside who are witness to this process to understand. So if someone sees that you have lost somebody and they see you having a good time, right? That thought is, why aren't they sad?
Mm-hmm.
But just because you see them in, having a good day or having a good moment, we won't even say a day, having a good moment does not mean that grief is not present in their life. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important to understand that roller coaster that we see, those peaks and valleys, those peaks can look good. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. It's all part of the process, and it's all very, very normal.
And then, is it possible to repeat the stages of grief? So obviously, because it is non-linear, it can go from any way, it can come back around. And even if you get to acceptance, as you mentioned earlier, you can still go right back to denial or to bargaining or whatever it may be, right?
Right. And there's no time frame either, right? So not only can you repeat these stages, there's no time period of 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. They're going to be present. It's that brick in your pocket that you go, you're fine, and then all of a sudden you reach in, you feel it, and you're like, there you are. Mm-hmm. So it's very possible to repeat these stages of grief throughout your lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Now, what if you don't go through the stages of grief? And that's basically, you're not allowing yourself to go through them. It's not that you're not going through. It's like maybe you try to close yourself off. What kind of impact will that have on you in the long run?
Well, at some point it's going to come out. I've seen, where there have been moments where people don't want to talk about it, suppress it, and you honor that and you allow that for a while, but then you do see it play out later on. So, it goes back to that saying that I told you my friend had, suppression equals depression. So we want to make sure that, when it does, when it comes out, that there's a support system in place, and that support system is safe, and to where that person knows, okay, this is my time now. It may not have been when it happened, it may not have been right away, but this is my time now, that support system is in place, for that person to feel emotionally safe, right? So it can affect you, but we still want to honor that person's process and just kind of be there, right? And for them to know they have a safe place to go to.
All right, now they say that there is obviously that very big connection between grief and depression. It's actually one of the stages of grief, right? But 40% of grievers meet the criteria for major depression 1 month after their loss, and 24% still meet the criteria after 2 months, according to some research. What do we need to be looking out for when it comes to depression, and when should we realize that this isn't just one of the stages of grief? This is actually something bigger.
Again, I think it's when we start to see a severe decline, where a person is isolating a person. We see that weight gain, weight loss, and it's for a prolonged period of time. I think when we see it for a certain amount of, I mean, it's understandable, adjustment, things like that are going to come into play. But when a person starts disconnecting from their normal routines, I think that's when we start to, some sort of intervention needs to happen, because we also want to be aware, again, of, any sort of suicidal thoughts. We want to be aware and kind of keep that contact with somebody and, check in with them. It's okay to check in. We can allow a person to go through their process, but let's still make sure that we're checking in and making sure that, we're not in a suicidal ideation place, and that a support system is there for that person.
All right. Now, grief and substance use disorder, a lot of people use alcohol or illegal substances, drugs, to self-medicate, to numb themselves. How dangerous is it to be partaking in substances like that?
Right. Well, and I think we see that, often because, again, those immense feelings that we feel. So, it's very dangerous, because it becomes addictive, to not feel, to not go through those emotions. So if we turn to substances, we turn to, I know I've seen situations where they turn to substances and it becomes part of their daily functioning, right? It's not necessarily to get high or to get drunk, it's to function. And so that is, something we also need to be aware of. And again, make sure that that people who are going through the process know that they have a support system. So when we start seeing that, this is beyond, just a social drink or, things like that, that we start, intervening, and we start, allowing them to know that they have a support system.
Now, older adults experience grief at a higher rate than younger adults or children. That's obvious because of spousal loss.
Right.
As you get older, you lose more of your friends.
Right.
And so how can we support our abuelitos, abuelitas, our older adults in our lives, to make sure that we're watching out for them and are truly that support system for them?
Again, just making them aware that we're there. Earlier I said a lot of times we don't know what to say, and that's okay. But I think just being present and being there for them in a way that maybe doesn't look like an emotional support, but we can be there to get a meal, to take them to the store, to spend time with them. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to sit there and talk about, the death and things like that, but that we're there to be a person of support, especially for our older population, and we may see them be a little more stoic because, they're starting to see, but that we're also aware that this stage for them is also different.
Okay.
They're going through something different also. So just the awareness of it and being present, in body and able to support them, I think, is the most important.
All right, let's talk about some of the myths and facts about grief and grieving. So I'm going to tell you a myth, and you tell me why it's a myth.
Okay.
So the pain will go away faster if you ignore it.
Gosh, where do I even start? I think that is, some people think that at the beginning because, again, they don't want to feel that. But, that's not true. We can't just wish it away. We're going to feel it. So it's not going to necessarily go away faster because you ignore it. You may push it to the side, but eventually it's going to come out. Eventually it's going to rear its head.
All right. Myth number 2, it's important to be strong in the face of loss.
And it goes back to one of those things that I said, it's not something we want to say to somebody, because it's okay to show that vulnerable side to us. If we're parents, it's important for us, that's a very teachable moment for kids, right? We show them what it is to be vulnerable, but then look at what we do to be resilient, to move from this, to progress. So when we're able to teach that to those around us, not just kids, right? But I mean, it shows them that, hey, this is possible. I can be vulnerable, I can be emotional, but I can still progress and I can still move forward. So I don't have to be strong, because there's something about being strong and being vulnerable.
Now, if you don't cry, it means you aren't sorry about the loss.
You know, if you, everybody grieves differently. You know, some people, laugh. Some people cry. There's different ways. So we don't want to put it in a box. Again, that's what makes this so personal. That's what makes this process so individualized, is that it doesn't look one way. So if we don't see a person crying, it does not mean that there's lack of love. It does not mean that there's lack of grieving. So we want to be aware that not everybody grieves the same way.
All right. And the final myth, moving on with your life means forgetting about your loss.
Totally false. I think, there's this expectation that grieving, again, has to look a certain way. And, when we have this expectation of, why is this person moving on when, this death was so significant to them, to me, that's just an expectation that we can't have, again, because it looks so different. So when somebody's moving on, we can't assume that that process is just an easy process for that person to move on. They too are going through their own, way of dealing with it, but it doesn't look the same as ours. So just because, when a person is moving on, a person can move on and still be grieving. A person can move on, and go into new relationships and still take their loved one with them. The trick is, and the key is, finding someone who's going to allow you to honor that, or be, I shouldn't say allow, but be with you to honor that, right? So the grieving process can look okay, and it can look seamless for that person, and that's okay.
All right, let's talk about some coping tips now. So here's some advice. Turn to friends and family members. It's important to have that. We've talked about it for a while now. It's important to have that support system.
Right. And you know what else? It's okay to vocalize what you need from that person. A lot of times, we don't really say what we need. And sometimes it's okay to tell a friend, I just need you to listen. Please don't tell me anything, but I need you to listen to me. I'm just going to let it out. And then we get that support that we need. Because a lot of times when people will support us in the way they feel is the right way, and they mean well, but that may not be what we need. So it's okay to tell somebody, I need you to support me this way, and just listen, right? So it's important to vocalize what you need from your support system.
All right. Now, talking about friends and what to say and not to say, accept that many people feel awkward when trying to comfort someone who is grieving.
Honesty. Be honest. If you tell a person, I don't know what to tell you, I wish I had words to tell you, there's comfort in that also. So it's okay to be honest and to vocalize. You're not really going to say like, oh my gosh, I feel totally awkward, right? But but you're going to say like, I don't know what to tell you, I wish I had the words, and there's comfort in that. So it's okay to be honest, in how you're feeling as well when you're trying to comfort a friend.
And if you're the person grieving, understand that not everyone's going to react the way that you would hope for them to react. Right. And so that's why you go to your Rolodex of a support system of friends and family to find that person that can give you what you need at that time. Right.
So you want to be able to access all these people in your life, exactly like you said, to get what you need, to help you through the process.
All right. Face your feelings.
That's a tough one.
It is.
Who wants to face their feelings? Nobody, it's tough, because sometimes we have to face a lot of things that maybe we ignored throughout our life, or, things that we went through and now they resurface depending on, the death, depending on the relationship that we had, so when we face those feelings and we're honest about them, you have to go through it to get through it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You have to be able to face them, but in your time.
Yes.
I think that's what's important. It's very easy to say, face it, but the trick is, in your time, in your process, honor what you need to go through. And that's where that's where it's okay, right? So when we say face your fears, face your feelings, it's not just, hey, go for it, right? What we're saying is, in your time, in your process, the way that is right for you, slowly, or whatever is working for you.
All right. Express your feelings in a tangible or creative way. So we talked about journaling, writing letters, whatever you need to do, art, whatever it may be, but just find a way that allows you to have that healthy outlet, right?
Right. There's no, when we're talking about creativity, whatever honors you and your loved one, right? So it could be, leaving pictures at the graveside. It could be, writing an essay. It could be just a letter that you tear up and nobody reads, but you're getting it out. Any way that helps you through the process that feels good, that feels healthy, that feels right, honor it and go for it.
Try to maintain your hobbies and interests, and I'll add to this, or find new ones.
Yeah, and it could be an array of things. I've had somebody tell me that somebody had told them, go for a walk. And they said, well, no, when I go for a walk, I think more. So that didn't work for that person. So then they're going to have, then they have to explore and find what works for them, because walking didn't work, right? For me, when I lost my dad, it'll be 6 years, I started to go outside more, right? And I started to walk. And then I would, I practiced mindful exercises where my thoughts were more focused on what was around me, what I was seeing. And then slowly I started jogging, slowly I started running. And then that was my release, So for everybody, it's going to look differently. But I think, exploring that is really good.
I'll say that after, I said new hobbies because after my divorce, I went windsurfing, and it was the most amazing, and surfing, and it was the most amazing thing to learn something that I'd never done before, but it allowed me to feel kind of a different sense of pride,
Right.
So,
and it's almost, when you talk about windsurfing, and I read, automatically I thought of, just the openness, the wind, the freeness of it, and how that kind of went with, allowing yourself to be free, and embracing this new life and hobby.
Now, look after your physical health. It's extremely important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself during your grieving process.
Right. And again, a relationship with your primary care physician is always so important. I really express that to anybody I come across who's going through anything, because it really is a team effort, right? So when we're talking about mental, there's no way that we can just talk about mental and not physical. So we have to make it a team effort and make sure that we're keeping in contact with our primary care physician and making sure that we're addressing all areas, right? And so that we're all in this together to help a person progress in the manner that's good for them.
Now, plan ahead for your grief triggers. So if you know something is going to trigger you, plan ahead for it.
Right. So, and it's okay to set boundaries, and say, I'm not going to go to this because I know it's going to put me, in a certain state. So it goes back to what we say, face your feelings. There's a fine line, right? So there's one way to face your feelings, but again, in the manner that's healthy for you and good for you. If you feel doing something is not going to be good and healthy for you, that's okay for you to set that boundary and say no, even if those around you don't understand. Even if they kind of, are like, well, wait a minute, why aren't you going to this? Why aren't you? Honor what you're feeling and those boundaries that you set, and that's okay. That's okay.
All right. Join a support group.
Yes.
So find like-minded individuals who may be going through a similar situation to have that support system if you don't have family and friends that you feel you can count on, right?
Right. Finding someone who has gone through similar situations, right? Because again, one death is not the same as the other, and one experience is not, but you can share similar experiences and then share in that and find comfort in, okay, I'm not alone in this, right? So somebody who has lost, a parent that was maybe older, may not find the same similarities of somebody who lost somebody younger, right? Because it's not a similar situation. So finding a support group to where either you can find similar situations, and then that'll help you feel, heard and seen.
All right, and lastly, talk to a therapist or grief counselor.
Yes, that's always important, and again, it's not to take away the grief. I think there's this misconception that, when you go to a therapist, everything's going to be all
perfect,
better and
yes.
perfect, and 1 or 2 sessions and I'm done. It's not what it's about. It's about going through your process and having somebody to hear you and reminding you that it's okay to go through this in what feels good for you, in the way that you need to feel honored and validated in your process. So a lot of times we just need somebody to hear us and help us through that process.
And most importantly, you are not alone. Always remember that you are not alone.
Right. It's important for us to know that we do have a support system. And even if we don't have anybody close to us, there's so many community agencies out there that are there to help. I really talk about the 988, suicide hotline. It's not just for suicidal ideations. If you need somebody to talk to at that moment, pick up that phone. You can text, but reach out, right? And so if you really feel like you have no connections with anybody, do that. 988 is a great number to have as a resource.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Casey. It's always a pleasure to have you here. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you all learned some very important and valuable information from your presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And that officially concludes our webinar. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll continue to prioritize your mental health and the mental health of your loved ones. Your mental health matters, and STHS Behavioral can help. The facility has served the South Texas community for more than 30 years, offering inpatient and outpatient treatment options, including the facility's recently launched chemical dependency unit. If you or a loved one is experiencing a mental health issue or dealing with substance use disorder, we encourage you to schedule a confidential assessment by calling our hotline at 388-1300. Remember, you are not alone. Don't hesitate to speak to a friend or seek professional help if you may be needing any emotional or mental health support. And if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please call the National Suicide and Crisis Line at 988. Licensed counselors are available to speak with you in English and Spanish 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Don't miss our next installment of this Let's Talk Mental Health series on Thursday, April 4th at 5:30 p.m. live via Facebook, when we'll be continuing to talk about alcohol abuse. We hope you can join us. To watch our previous Let's Talk Mental Health webinars, simply visit STHSLetsTalk.com. Until our next webinar, stay healthy, stay safe, and please continue to prioritize your mental well-being. Sometimes life's burdens can take their toll on your emotional well-being. If you or a loved one is struggling, know that you are not alone. South Texas Health System Behavioral can help you cope with depression, manage feelings of anxiety, regain control of mood swings, and recover from substance use disorders. Our staff is available 24/7, offering the quality and compassionate inpatient and outpatient care you need to overcome life's challenges. South Texas Health System Behavioral, where your mental health is our priority.